Today we're going to talk about the new Netflix animated series Midnight Gospel, so let's get started. Hey everybody, my name is Justin. I love to watch movies. If you guys love to watch movies too and Netflix, you guys are in the right spot. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell notification for more up and coming videos. Today we're going to talk about the Midnight Gospel. And this is from Pendleton, who is the creator of Adventure Time. And he is teaming up with Duncan Trussell, who has a podcast. And this is easily one of the trippiest Netflix shows I have ever seen. It is bizarre. It is so easygoing and it is so unique. I have never seen anything like the Midnight Gospel before. Clancy, a spacecaster with a malfunctioning multiverse simulator who leaves the comfort of his own home to interview beings living in dying worlds. So essentially how this series is set up, we are introduced to Clancy in the beginning of the series, and he has a space cast. He goes to these dying worlds, interviews different beings and creatures for his podcast that he has. But the dialogue for the show and the episodes is an actual podcast. So you get different guests on this podcast, and the opening credits of the episode tell you who is on the podcast. So we have a story that is set up for each episode, and you have some scripted moments for that kind of set up the story. But then you have the whole episode pretty much just being a podcast conversation with Duncan Trussell and a guest. And so you have a really easygoing conversation. And so the dialogue is just really flowing, and it's just a podcast, and it's put into an animated series. And then you have a whole story behind it and a whole animated sequence with it as well. And if you've ever seen Adventure Time, you know how trippy that show is. This is up a notch. With it being on Cartoon Network for Adventure Time, you're kind of limited. With it being on Netflix, you have no limits. And so a lot of it is really, really bizarre. And a lot of the conversations that are within this podcast are really interesting and really engaging. There's one about death. There's one where they're talking about the legalization of weed. There's conversations about path to sobriety. And there's even one with a guy talking about his preferences for magic over traditional Buddhist meditation. The conversations are so interesting to watch, and they just feel so natural amongst these animated sequences. One thing I caught myself doing over and over again is being so invested in the conversations and listening to this podcast that I almost forgot that there is a story going on in the background and all of the beautiful animation. So I watched these episodes a couple times through, once for listening to the podcast, just listening to it, and then once for watching it for the animation, because it is so bizarre and there's so much within it. But I often found myself just listening to the podcast and ignoring the animation and all of the craziness that is happening behind the podcast and that is going on. So there's a unique story for every single one, and Clancy is going to this dying world, meeting someone, interviewing them, and they're just kind of traveling alongside different places. And so you get all these bizarre things that are going on, and the podcast is matching the story that is going on. Like I said, you have some scripted moments of when Clancy first arrives on this dying planet and wants to interview someone. And there's some scripted moments throughout, kind of like when the characters are stopping and doing something or being interrupted by another character. Towards the end of the series, there is one episode that's a little more scripted than others, but still has some podcast moments throughout. This is a unique show. I swear I've never seen anything like this. I used to watch Adventure Time, so I'm aware of the bizarre, crazy moments from that. And Pendleton was very limited in what he could do with Adventure Time, but still really weird. And then you have Duncan Trussell with his podcast, which is called the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, where he interviews a range of characters for life philosophies and just a bunch of weird things. I don't usually listen to podcasts. I think I've listened to a few here and there, but I would be really interested in checking out Duncan Trussell's podcast because the conversations that he has with the guests along the way are really unique. So I love the balance of creating a story around these podcasts and implementing them into the show while also having that bizarre animation throughout. I was fully invested in the show from beginning to end. I watched it 2 times through. Like I said, once for the podcast and once for the animation. Guys, check this show out when it hits Netflix. It is a unique experience. I have never seen anything like The Midnight Gospel. It is a really catchy show. Bizarre animation. It's beautiful. It's colorful. It's bright. It's unique. But those podcast interviews are really interesting as well, and I love how they were implemented into the show. The show is so silly. It's profound. It's a great combination of people working together. You need to check out The Midnight Gospel. I'm going to go ahead and give The Midnight Gospel an A-. Thank you guys for checking my review for The Midnight Gospel. When it comes to Netflix, definitely check it out. And make sure to stay tuned for more up-and-coming Netflix content. My name is Just Watches Movies, and you stay classy, YouTube.